Привit, I'm Chuck Olenek. I'm a Ukrainian-American. I was baptized with the name Yaroslav, which is also the name that I use in the historical reenactment group, the Society for Creative Anachronism. And all my life I was exposed to Ukrainian culture, Slavic culture, but when I got into the reenactment group, I started being more methodical about looking at the various sources and just gathering information of what someone would have dealt with in the medieval period and how they would have thought. And one of the things I started doing was I started looking at Slavic folklore and Slavic mythology, which at times is kind of hard to find, because when the Eastern Orthodox Church came in, courtesy of Saint Volodymyr, the church pretty much controlled a lot of the writing, so you wouldn't see a lot of sources or a lot of information on the supernatural or the other gods and that sort of thing. And the Slavic world is just seemingly infested with all sorts of nature spirits, and some are mentioned in accounts that they're called eyewitness accounts, called bialichki, and it's basically, the account would go, and then there's this peasant who went into the forest and he saw a bunch of squirrels seemingly moving across the forest floor like a carpet, and then there'd be what the Russians would call skazki and the Ukrainians would call kazki. These are more elaborate tales. They're wonder tales or folk tales. But the church would explain away a lot of these spirits that the peasants would talk about as, oh, these are the guys that were following Lucifer. And when Lucifer got booted from heaven, these guys all came with him. And some fell to the underworld where they labored as karliki, or dwarves. And others fell into the forests and the lakes and the rivers. And some fell in the meadows, and some remained in the sky to cause mischief. And some fell to the homesteads and the farms. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of this stuff. And what I want to do is I want to kind of share this information with you. And this might take a few videos. So I figured that what I'll do is we'll start with those who are infesting the waters. And that means we got to go to the best known water spirit, the Rusalka. The Rusalka goes by a number of different names, and it's not just because the Slavic world is so large, and so Polish ones are different from Belarusian ones, which are different from Ukrainian ones, which are different from Slovakian ones, although that part's true. But they also go by different names because of different things they do. She could be known as Chertovka, or the jokestress. She could be a demon joker, an abductor. She could be called a tickler because of something that I'll explain a little later on. But in the end, it basically comes down to she and her sisters are water nymphs, and they dance in the forest clearings and meadows on the night of the new moon. And in Ukraine, the Rusalka is often called a mavka, and she's linked with the water there. Okay, that connects with a lot of the other myths. In Belarus, she would be more connected to the forest and the field. So there's a lot of regional variations as far as what they do. They are almost always naked. They often appear as glamorous young women. It's interesting that in Ukraine, where she's called the Mavka, she doesn't have a back. meaning you can see, like, it basically inside her, if you're looking from that angle. And that might explain why the Mavka steals flax and makes thread from it and weaves essentially transparent clothing, which was probably like the only reference I found to clothing on Rusalki of any kind. And in most beliefs, the Rusalka has long, loose hair. And that's linked to a lot of Slavic traditions of unwedded maidens have their hair unbraided or loosely braided. And if you're married, you're supposed to have it tightly, tightly braided together. And so there's a bit of slang that goes around to describe a woman who is walking around with loose hair as, ooh, she's walking like a Rusalka. So one of the real obvious features about them is the Rusalki would carry magical combs. And, they could be, they're made from fish bones most often. And they could be seen hanging out in the trees or whatever, or their legs in the water, and they're combing their hair. When they go on land, they can basically produce moisture, by using the combs. In those eyewitness accounts, the Belyachki, the Rusalka was said to be able to change her appearance at will. She could turn into a fish or a toad or a frog. In those eyewitness accounts, the Belyachki, the Rusalka was said to be able to change her appearance at will. She could turn into a fish or a toad or a frog, or she could match her appearance to what the man desires that she's trying to seduce. So instead of, like, I've usually thought of them as blonde, and just based on different things I'd read and things I'd heard, she could be a brunette. There could be a slight greenish tinge to her hair. The hair could be completely green. I've also read accounts where someone met a Rusalka, and the longer he looked at her, the more her hair changed from one color to ending up as green. They were also considered, they were supposed to represent like a universal beauty. So in Slavic culture, the Rusalka was highly respected but feared. So where does a Rusalka come from? Well, she's one of the unquiet dead. It's going to be the soul of a young woman who drowned in or near a river or a lake, and she's come back to as a spirit to haunt that waterway. And there's a lot of different origin stories that suggest, like, there's a young woman that committed suicide by drowning due to an unhappy marriage, or she was jilted by a lover, or abused by an older husband, and so she chose this way to exit. And some suggest that nope, that's not the case. That's murder. That she may have been killed because of an unwanted pregnancy, and she must live out her designated time on Earth as a Rusalka. So you might also have unclean dead, or people that died in ways that I guess you get the overlay of Christianity, that she was a witch and died and becomes a Rusalka, or that she was an unbaptized child. Okay, so there's a Christianity thing, or she wasn't given last rites. And that kind of gives you the idea, well, okay, if that happened to women, what happens to the men that are, going to be killed or die that way? And they apparently can become Vodiani, which is a male water spirit, which looks nothing like a Rusalka. We'll get to him later. Some of the Rusalki origin stories involve not drowning, but death by strangulation. And that, okay, so now we have murder going on. And that if this Rusalka's death was avenged, her spirit could move on. Before the 19th century, there were a lot of stories that viewed the Rusalki as actually benevolent spirits, and that they would come out of the water in the springtime and with their magic fish combs bring life-giving moisture to the land, and so they're kind of connected to fertility and help nurture the crops. There's some Ukrainian accounts that the Rusalka or the Mavka would also help farmers take care of cattle and driving out wild animals and that sort of thing. And then the stories start to change. In the 19th century, the Rusalka's bad. The 19th century accounts are like, nope, she's bad. She's an unclean, dead spirit, and her job is to basically go out and lure young men and seduce them with either her looks or her voice, and bring him into the waterways where she might use her long hair to ensnare his feet and drag him into the water. And she will either drown him or tickle him to death, and that actually shows up in a lot of the Rusalka accounts. Or she might enslave him and take him to her underwater palace, which is decorated with all sorts of looted stuff from boats that sank. Or the Rusalka and her sisters may come out of the water in springtime, and they're going to climb into willow trees and birch trees that are overhanging the water and kind of build nests there and sort of hang out there. Or they go to perform dances in the open spaces near the water. And sometimes the young men would be dragged in to these, let's see, the description was these wild dances and orgies where a demon would be playing a flute or pipes to accompany them, and the man is supposed to, be dragged into this, and he's forced to participate until he, drops from exhaustion. That gets us into Rusalnaya week. Rusalnaya week was the most dangerous week of the entire year when it concerned the Rusalki, because this is when they were to come up out of the water, and they'd pick their particular trees, like the birch trees or the willows, and hang out in those trees and swing in the branches. Or they're performing their dances in the glades. There'd be the demon piper playing. Interestingly enough, after those dances, the grass would be a lot thicker, the barley would be growing better. All right. Women were not supposed to do chores during that week, because if you did chores during that week, you were punished. You were not supposed to go swimming during that week, because that was forbidden. Like, hey, that's the Rusalka's territory. Don't do that. And instead, what girls were supposed to be doing is they would be making wreaths of flowers to put in their hair. Because, hey, that's what the Rusalki are doing. They're supposed to really like that. And what you were supposed to do is take the wreath, and the girls were supposed to throw them in the water as offerings. All right. Now, when the church comes in, Rusalnaya week gets overlaid with Pentecost week. All right. So now we're connecting, the church stuff there. And there's a lot of concern about the unbaptized babies. In Ukrainian thinking, if a soul lived up to 7 years and didn't go to heaven, all right, unbaptized, the baby becomes a Rusalka and is going to haunt people. So what you were supposed to do is, to save a soul of an unchristened baby, you were to take a kerchief during Pentecost holidays and you say a name, and cry that I baptize you, and hurl the kerchief into the air, and that was supposed to rescue the soul and then send the soul on to heaven. One of the things that would happen, like the capper during Rusalka week, was there's a final ritual banishment of the Rusalki, and there's an effigy of a Rusalka. And this would be taken to the waters, right, and thrown in the waters. And this was something that was actually going on as entertainment as part of the week in Russia and Belarus and Ukraine until the 1930s. Need protection? You take a few leaves of wormwood, you put them in an amulet, and that's supposed to protect you, to drive away the Rusalki. You want to protect your property, protect things that they might want to steal and take back to their underwater palaces. Put some leaves around there. If you run into, the phrase that I read was, severe infestations, like, oh, there's a whole bunch of them living in the water here, you're supposed to scatter leaves on the water and make them go away. So now we're going to get into another water spirit, a variant. This is the Navki, which sounds a lot like Mavki, the Ukrainian Rusalka, but a lot of these things are kind of all connected. So these are malevolent spirits of the dead. They're supposed to be the souls of children who died at birth. Or of pregnant women who died violent deaths, or who died at the hands of their mothers. There's not a lot of good stuff associated with them. And there might be some descriptions that say, oh, they're hideous and hairy, ooh, icky. But a lot of the descriptions kind of connect them with, infants and young girls. They're seen rocking in trees or tree branches, and they're wailing and crying in the night, and some are begging for baptism. Well, that kind of connects it to the Rusalka week and, how to save the soul of an unchristened child. So that kind of makes this a Christianized thing. Others just want revenge on the living. They want payback. Because, hey, you let me die nameless. So they would try to confuse people and lure travelers into really dangerous places and causing them to drown. Women that were in childbirth could be attacked by the Navki. There's another variant called the Polunochitsna, and they inhabit the swamps. And what they are is, these are night demons. And they like to come and torment children with nightmares. Okay. And we'll kind of cover this a little more in another chapter. Okay, that's going to take care of the distaff side of Slavic water spirits. In the next video, we're going to go over and take a look at the male water spirits, who are very, very different. I hope you stick with me on my journey.